Hello everybody, welcome to this lecture on sharing, another one. So this is more specific to Pharo. I will explain in this lecture what are shared pools. So shared pools, in essence, this is how can we do a static sharing of state between different hierarchies. So the goal of the lecture, this is to revisit sharing and to just that you understand shared pool, because this is something that few people knows in fact. The question is, okay, we saw in the previous lecture that we can share state within a hierarchy using shared variable. The question now, this is how can we share the value between different hierarchies? So basically, if I do it graphically, a shared variable can be accessed in all this space. Now the problem is that sometimes I have another hierarchy here and I want to access this value. How do we do it? Because we don't want to repeat it here. So if you remember, a shared variable can be accessed from instance methods or class methods and all the subclass within hierarchies. So this means that I have a class here with a shared variable, and all the subclass here and there can access this shared variable. Okay? So if you remember in the previous lecture, I was showing that in the color class initializes the shared variable, and the instance variable methods like private blue can access this in the color methods, and the color class can access that by initializing the value. It could read also the value. So this was what was in the previous lecture. So now the key point of this lecture, this is, okay, we can share within a hierarchy. How can we share between different hierarchies? So for example, line feed, all the constant like carriage return that are related to text, we want to have them in the string hierarchy, but we want to have them in the text hierarchy. And a text is not a string, and a string is not a text. So how do we avoid to repeat the same code and the same constant in these two hierarchies or three hierarchies? That's the point. So for that, Pharo use shared pools. So what is a shared pool? This is a group of shared variables. And the shared pool will define the variable and it will initialize the value of its shared variable. And then users, the classes, will just declare, oh, I want to use that shared pool to access its shared variables. So let's look at it. So you see, for example, for the chronology constant, like how many nanoseconds do you have in seconds, the months, names, or how many seconds are in 1 hour, and all these kinds of things, the days in months, and those are defined in a chronology constant shared pool, which inherits from the class shared pool, and it defines a set of shared variables. You see, for example, then the shared pool, the chronological constant class, because the shared pool is a kind of a class, as an initialize method, and then he will just say, okay, you know, the second in the day, this is that, the how many seconds in minutes, how many minutes per hour, how many hours per day. It will initialize all these shared variables that are grouped in a shared pool. So then the user, so imagine now date and time. If date and time want to access to all this logic, it will just say, oh, you know, I want to use the shared pool chronology constants. Notice that you can also define its own instance variable. There is no problem. A date and time will have seconds and all these kinds of information, offset, Julian days number. It can also define its own shared variable and reuse this group of shared variable. They have been initialized, so you can use them. Here what you see is that in date and time, as soon as the class date and time declares that it is using the shared pool, it will be able to access the class variable of the shared pool as if they would be defined in the class. So second in day, which was in the chronology constant shared pool. So second in day is a class variable defined in the chronology constant shared pool, but we can access it directly because the class date and time declared, okay, I want to use this shared pool. And you can do the same as at the class level. So duration, for example, the duration class will use second in day because duration also want to use chronology constant. You see here, for example, week, that is a subclass of time span, will have its own instance shared variable, and use the same shared pool. And it will be able to use day names, which is a shared variable of the chronology constant shared pool. So there is no problem. We can mix everything. This is what I already said before. So we can mix shared variable, instance variable, and shared pool together. And in fact, the compiler will just go and pick up the right information in the right place. So I have one warning, and I'm not sure that I stress it enough in the shared variable lecture. Only put constant object in shared pool. You can put objects that are changing, but should always consider that if you change the value in a shared pool or in a shared variable, it will impact all the objects that are using them. So they are shared, so a change impacts everybody. So in general, we expect shared variable to be constant. So the conclusion is that shared pools are really handy to shared constant between different hierarchies. They are really nice to manage constant for bindings. For example, if you want to bind a C library, you will have to often have a lot of constants, and then you can group them like that from the user of such constant. This is easy. It just use a shared pool and not thousands of class variable. And pay attention that this is always better to use constant in shared variable and shared pools.